get these slides and see where we're at. Okay. So, welcome back, everybody. This whole moving rooms, it's hard going, isn't it?
You're getting to know the area.
You're getting to know the whole university, yeah. Yeah. Not a bad room though, and if anyone wants to play us a little tune.
Can anyone play the piano?
Can anyone play the piano?
Well, I don't feel like you should be able to, Sam.
Oh, Lizzie's got an idea.
I don't have any musical.
No musical skills. No, me neither. Okay, so for the second part of the session, we're going to be really kind of honing in on the idea of evidence-based practice. So picking up on some of the ideas that were in the presentation on PebblePad that you should have all watched. So the first of them was this idea of positivism and interpretivism. Should we do the pointy thing again? Because I know you liked it so much. So this idea of positivism, I do struggle to say both of these words. So in terms of positivism, it's this idea that the world is orderly, that it exists independently of us as humans, and that we can kind of study it objectively, and we can apply knowledge to create the desired changes. So positivists will very much be supporters and advocates of kind of quite purist evidence-based practice. So you know, it is like your empirical research, your experimental design, your observations, whereas interpretivist knowledge is about this idea that actually human beings are complicated and are independent and have... That's why the door was open. Hello. I don't know why it locks, but hey ho. Just means you've got to walk of shame, doesn't it? So interpretivist research generally is small scale, recognising the complexities of people's individual situations and environments, and that there are so many different variables that will affect human experience that actually it's going to be really, really difficult to have studies that will explain and provide answers that you can apply to all. Okay? That's, again, the ideas are here, they're on the presentation, probably articulated slightly better than I just have. But I'm interested in, again, where people's leanings are really. So would you see yourself more at the positivist end, where you're seeking kind of certainty, where you believe that actually we can find the best approach to apply in all situations, or are you more at the interpretivist end, where you believe actually that we're not going to get these kind of grand narratives about how the world works, but we can seek to understand individuals and the commonalities between individual groups. Where do you... So let's do the pointy thing again. Middle, yeah? Middle, interpretivist. We haven't got anyone pointing here, have we? Hey! Thank you, Michael, just to be devil's advocate there. Maybe I don't know. Okay. It may be, you haven't got your signs with what you studied, it may be that those things might influence. Yeah. You know? So for me, knowing that there's a few businessy types who studied business, I studied management a long time ago, to be fair. But certainly this was this end of a more positivist approach to knowledge. And as I've gone into social work, I've kind of moved probably a little bit further this way. But I do find myself pulled towards positivism. So I'm sort of, a little bit in the middle, but I sort of move back and forth. So So this really relates quite significantly to ideas around evidence-based practice and what it means. So this is another definition. Evidence-based practice is about laying down general principles based on evidence to reinforce guidance and methods in practice. And what I talked about in the presentation was that social work has been criticised for being, there is this quote, the woolly-minded and vague and open to bias. So evidence-based practice has kind of come out in response to some of those criticisms, and for a desire to be accountable, to be, you know, all these principles around best practice. You know, let's only do the things that we know will work. So these influences have led to much focus on evidence-based practice in recent years. So in the presentation, there was a discussion about different approaches to evidence-based practice. The first being a top-down approach. Does anyone want to have a go at defining what that approach might be? Lizzie?
Is it like macro and then macro the world, scientific sort of thing, down to the individual?
No, I get no.
That's how I see it, but maybe
No.
I'm completely wrong.
But yeah, I mean, it is macro, I guess, in that it's coming from policymakers, senior managers, yes. So it's that those policymakers or managers would look at what works and what's good value and would impose a system or an approach on the workforce. Is anyone aware of that happening? Has anyone got experience of that in practice? Like an approach that's prescribed by...
Would that be like working in the school? So you
Yeah.
have the curriculum and
Yeah, man, that's very top-down, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very top-down, I guess quite positivist in the sense that, I mean, it's not something I know a huge amount about, but I'm guessing it would be very much statistically driven and empirically research driven.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, good example. Yeah.
Healthcare.
Sorry?
Healthcare.
Healthcare, yeah. So what's your experience of that? What approaches are advocated within the healthcare setting? Any examples?
Not that I can remember what they're called, but it would always be like the top dogs, and then it's like consultants, psychiatrists, nurses,
CBT.
HCAs.
You talked about CBT, and if you look at what is evidence-based within mental health, NICE guidelines, so the NICE guidelines will say if you're experiencing particular mental health difficulties, particularly anxiety, depression, that the evidence base is that CBT works. So that's what you get. Yeah? And certainly that was my experience within drug and alcohol services. So there's been a number of different approaches that have been seen to be, you know, evidence-based, supported by research to say this works, so this is what, as practitioners, you will deliver in these circumstances. Yeah, so this kind of top-down approach. Okay? So, I just want you to have some discussions about that on your tables, if you would. So have some discussions. I think I'm just trying to remember. Sorry, you're going to laugh at me now, Sophie. I'm just going to remember what I said you're going to do. Oh, that was it. That's what I was going to do. I've remembered. I want you to have a heated debate. Okay? So I'm going to separate you into two groups.
How heated. Yeah.
Very.
Check your handbag out.
So I tell you what, if we have, probably about the same number-ish, if we have the front of the room, so these two tables, you're going to debate, you're going to argue for a top-down approach to evidence-based practice. Do it. And you guys at the back are going to argue against. Yeah? So just spend, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, or see how you get on, preparing your arguments.
Say the topic again.
A top-down approach to evidence-based practice. Yeah? Yeah? So you're arguing for, and they're arguing against. So start reading for the discussion and prepare your arguments, okay?
You googling the answer, Michael?
Go on, Google it.
Are you going to have to get the door?
Oh,
Top down approach would be, you have to know what less prone to error.
Yeah?
Because if you say, okay, everybody do what you see best for you, people will do, like, there's tendency for mistakes. Because people's judgments are informed by numerous things. But top down means probably there's a round table planning the entire curriculum thing based on statistics, evidence, experience. And then having come up with that, they pass it down to follow up with this, knowing that at some point they will review this based on outcome, rather than allowing practitioners to carry out what you think best, and then or bring up what you think is the best ideas. There will be numerous ideas, and it's going to be chaotic.
And I think another point with the top down as well is that certainly in the healthcare and things, there has to be some if everyone's on the then we can't have so there needs to be some sort of thing like this it's not mine and I don't agree, but I like to win an argument, so can I say the working perspective?
So if you make a wrong decision, it affects everybody's talking.
And I think they'll argue
They're all right.
I think they'll argue that the school, like for instance, they'll say, oh, it's not one shoe fits all, it's one shoe for the majority. And it's going to be for cover, and no one's actually having to put it on. So that's how we'll argue about it.
From everyone, but maybe in their point of view, they're like, it works for the majority.
And you wouldn't have to feel like, so but then you go on your
So we're supporting something. I think have to win. I think from the top down settlement, probably decision makers, managers, the ones on top, key decision makers, and what is needed is dismantled or shared among employees. So decision makers are the ones on top, and employees follow suit. So in what organization will public dialogue from the bottom to the top, or in top down, probably say information and from the top. Then I'll probably say the employees or whoever, the ones below, have their opinions, but they cannot tell you what's been made in the top.
okay. Yeah.
I think one of our arguments again would be nobody goes to the management directly. You don't start your career at the top. You started from down. So people at the top are not ignorant of the things happening. Because that's what they will come up with. They didn't start from the top. So they have they have experience. You down there, you just came how many years? You can't, we know these things before getting to management. We've been there 10 years. They climbed up the ladder. Yeah, hence,
what are their
it's better for us to jump up. So it's better for us to management to structure pass it down as policy. I think that's what it should mean. There's nothing that people do, the top managers or the supervisors or whoever are ignorant of what the employees are recommending. Ignorance on their own part. But probably going to establishment to go higher. And you need the top managers to know what you're doing. Because they are taking the lead or taking the key shot of the organization or whatever. Just like, for example, Jenny. Imagine we're the one dictating what Jenny should teach us next class. It doesn't make sense because she knows better than what we do. Even though some people older than her, maybe not, I would say. But I'll probably say because she's on top, she decide what she next week we have our next class. But when the students start determining when we want the class, what topic we want to study, we won't accept it, then it's going to be a big problem.
I don't know if the
From top to bottom is good.
I can read confusion.
I see everything emails myself. I don't think. Yeah. Once we've got an email today, make sure we've got a meeting in
I'm standing in the motion that come down.
yeah, after this, I'll put a message.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike.
What's that for?
That's how we do it.
It's not how we debate.
Primary school, not here. That's how you get the use of it. Then you have to breathe.
No. Oh, God, I'm crying.
Yeah, I'll put it in the group chat and then. Yeah, I did my sentence. I just don't say it. Sorry, yeah.
You don't do any of that. Keep reading out.
So when
Can you read chapter 1 from the book,
No.
His favourite. It's interpreted.
How we doing? We've got our arguments ready. Do we need a little bit more time? Oh, she's going to come and exhausted you on. Looks like the ones at the back have still got. You good to go?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah? Right. So. So, let's have a debate. So, we'll try and do this sort of fairly. We'll start off with an argument for, and then we'll go for a counter, yeah? We'll see what happens. Okay, so who wants to start from this end of the room with one of their arguments for a top-down approach to evidence-based practice?
I'm looking at you like you got. I'm looking at them. Go on, go.
Come on, or I'll just...
We have a lovely nominated speaker.
Oh, here, come on, let's get started. You've got this.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
Sorry. No pressure. Kick us off.
okay. So a top-down approach is very, very important because it has been tested and experimented, and it has worked over time. And for any approach of such measure to have worked over time, it's highly sustainable. So it's very important that it be followed to the latter at every given point. It helps a system to be very orderly and organized, and puts checks and balances to any system, and overall just creates efficient management of those systems.
Fab. Let's pause there then. Yeah, thank you. We will come back to the advocates. So let's counter that with an argument from the back of the room. Thank you, Keith, for getting us started. Who's going to counter that argument? Stephanie, thank you.
Okay, you said that the policies have been put and they have worked, but there was no evidence. He didn't give us any evidence to show that that worked. So it's an opinion of his. So there is no evidence to show that these policies actually worked.
So even if it works, right, it's usually profit driven or it's cost cutting. Right?
Oh.
If it works. And we know who bears the brunt of that. They're trying to cut costs on the top. The people below, they suffer.
Okay. So your counter argument really is undermining the quality of the evidence base and the influence over the evidence base. Is that No or no? No? No. Okay. Good. Tell me. Yeah.
So the thing is, from what he said, it happens, right? It's efficient. Evidence-based research helps. It's efficient. But the thing is, why is it efficient? You find out that it helps organizations make profit or it helps them cut costs. Right? And if the idea is to cut costs or make profit, who suffers for it? Right? The line.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So
Interesting.
He said about tried and tested. So look at NHS. So all these policies are made, tried and tested and advertised. But so look at the patients, the treatment, the queues, like the appointment. That's not moving. So even though it is tried and tested in the top level, ground reality is very different. So it's not moving because of the lags in the system, and then how it is being practiced.
So
it's like the experience on the ground level is very different than the policy. So they would have considered many factors, but they would have excluded the system, like on the building up of that policy making. So they have excluded some.
Okay.
So that wouldn't have been considered.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that affects.
Okay. Right. Okay. Ah.
Yeah, to support what you said.
Yeah,
like
thanks.
the top bottom is, I think it's very good. I'll use a practical example of what is happening now. We're students, you are the tutor. We do it the other way around. Imagine we start dictating where we have our classes, what we study. It's completely opposite because we haven't acquired the knowledge yet. So I'll probably say when you're top bottom has to do, people on top like the managers and things like that, they're the key decision makers. They take the decision needed for any organization, for example, the classroom to move forward. But it's usually whereby we, let's say the student or the employees, start making decisions for the top managers, it's never going to move forward because we're going to be arguing among ourselves, which about what we're doing now, because we have different sides to the argument. But the key decision makers, in this case, in this class, is going to be Jenny. Doesn't mean. So I'll probably say top bottom approach to things are very good because managers or tutors have acquired knowledge over the years. Whatever we are studying, you have probably done years ago, and you're learning. Probably you've made a few mistakes from the past. You've learned over it. Oh, so you haven't. So you've learned. You've not corrected. But there are so many things we're going to learn along the line. So many mistakes we're going to make. That is why we're students. So that means in this case we're employees. So I'll probably say top bottom is absolute. Not absolute, but it's better from down to top. So
it's something about the expertise or experience of those people who are, okay. I'm sorry, I know, but we're going to go counter and then we'll come back. Lucy's desperate to counter that.
Okay, so you're at the top, you're providing us knowledge, expertise, but they are based on your experiences, the knowledge that you've gathered from your time and placement. We have all come from areas of different experience. If we aren't inputting any of that, there is no development in what's being taught. We're going to go out and have different experiences. We're going to work in different areas where
I'm feeling like this is becoming a critique. Which was
was
not the intention.
We're going to go out and work in different areas with different needs, with people who have different experiences and who need different approaches to what may have worked with people that you worked with. And if it's just a full top-down approach of just, we'll tell you what's going on, we'll tell you what to do, there's no way for us to develop that further and to actually go, okay, that didn't work, however we found an even better approach, so let's try that one. But if there isn't any bottom to top approach included in that,
yes,
then there's no feedback, there's no further development.
Okay.
And just because one policy, for example, in the NHS worked in one hospital and they go, we tried this at this hospital, it was really, really effective, so we're going to implement it everywhere. Maybe that hospital had more resources, more staff, more time to implement that. Maybe they had less of these issues that other hospitals are having to balance and deal with. So actually it doesn't work effectively in these other hospitals because they have different needs. Okay. But it's too generalised. There's not enough wiggle room for...
Not enough wiggle room?
Yeah, there's not enough wiggle room for development and for individualisation for the needs of those individuals.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Michael.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
The top-down approach, I would say, is the best, because if there isn't one, there's going to be chaos. I'll use COVID. If 2020, if you allow people to do what they want, for instance, when it started, everyone wants to go out, have fun, but the government said, at first, they said, oh, we'll build a herd immunity, and that didn't work. Because I remember at the time, Liverpool had a game, and the game went on. Whereas in Italy, they started implementing the lockdown. So it shows that the idea doesn't work if you allow people to just carry on. But eventually, the top-down approach, they introduced 2 meters, what's it called again?
Social distancing.
Social distancing. They said, okay, if you're not going out for important, stuff, don't just go. Don't travel too far, and the face covering. So these are.
So we needed some control or some guidance from, I guess, following up from experts, from people who knew.
Exactly, because they're now advising government, this is how we need to, and eventually it wasn't extremely successful, but it did help to, save humanity, So
the NHS survived.
Yeah, and
but yes, okay,
so
okay. Thank you.
Probably a lot of us will be in a lot more danger if not for how it was managed. So I'll say top down is
good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, I know there's hands at the front, but we're gonna go to a counter and then we'll come back to the front. Stephanie?
I think they are missing something here.
Okay.
Inclusive, as in being inclusive. You want to control the people at the top. Why don't we work as a team? You call us, we sit at the table, we make policies that work for both sides. When we started this course, he said that you're supposed to be in control. When you started with us, you weren't even in control. You had to bring us in. You sat with us, you spoke with us. You wanted us to feel at home with you. So if you had that bossy-like nature, I'm not sure I don't even talk much, but I'm being comfortable now speaking this loud. Because of how you made me feel, you had to make us feel comfortable. So I don't see why, if the people at the top don't bring the people at the bottom to the table, okay, this policy is okay for you.
Okay. I think she's supporting us. What she said is simply supporting us. But she's supporting
Adam, sorry, I'll let Adam just follow up.
We spoke about a blended approach. So he was saying something, right? And then he also mentioned COVID. China runs a top bottom, right? Russia, right? They are draconian when you look at their system. That's like what happened during COVID.
Yes. Right? So your counter argument is about questioning the expertise or the the independence or of those people making those decisions. Is that fair to say?
That's part of it, but also working with the people at the bottom
Yeah.
to make those decisions,
Okay.
as opposed to just making the
Okay.
decisions.
Okay. Yeah.
Just wanted to counter some of the points that they've made. Firstly, about the financials. There's not an endless pot of money. Like, it would be so nice to go, oh, you need that, let's do this, let's do that. We would all be broke. There has to be an umbrella over everything. So even if it's the school curriculum, do you know what? It might not fit every child and some might need support down there. But we know that there's a blanket that the majority of children are getting. Same with the healthcare. If they've got this problem and this is prescribed through policy, some of them might not fit, but we're not actually spending a fortune of money that we don't have to try and make everything fit. There's just absolutely no way. And just because it is a top to bottom, the policies are created on statistics, feedback, people that have been there, experience. They're not saying you're at the bottom, you don't hear anything. It's come from somewhere. It's not just financial driven, but there's pockets of money. They need to be decided on where they're spent, and that information comes from statistics, feedback, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go to a counter. Saj, you've got something to
so
respond.
said about the financial side, distribution of wealth. So then that is going to be distributed, but we need an output, isn't it? It's like the distribution of wealth has to be leveled in the sense, okay, whatever you are spending, that need to have an impact. So we need to spend money wisely, isn't it? So it's like whatever the spending, so where you spend depends on the result depends on the area where you spend. So you have to find out where it comes from. So who is regarding the NHS on COVID? So the ground staff, whoever is working the nursing and carers, if they wouldn't have been there supporting, with their effort day to day, going into work and looking after all those people, the decision that government made or the policy makers made wouldn't have been worked. So that morale of the staff who are working on the ground, so that is the one who made that successful. It is not the policy. Yes, there was the guideline, but
it's the people who implement the policy. Yeah. Okay. Priyak?
So I just want to clear this fact. They shouldn't look at the top-bottom approach in isolation, because it seems that's what they're doing. It's an evidence-based approach we're talking about. And this evidence-based approach is based on the top-bottom approach. Now, there would even be no top-bottom approach, or bottom-top approach, if there is no top-bottom approach. So you would not even have an ability, you would not want to question a system that doesn't exist in the first place. So there would be a system that is actually running, and this system is purely evidence-based. It's open to checks and balances, and it keeps evolving.
Okay.
So it's purely evidence-based. This is very important. If we look at it in that perspective, not in isolation, it's not a Russian thing, it's not a draconian thing. It's purely based on practice, experience, based on attainable results. She mentioned statistics, things we have seen. It has worked over time. It can only keep evolving and getting better. And they can only engage when there is a basis of engagement.
Okay. Thank you, Kay.
So you're suggesting a collaborative approach, is it?
Lucy?
The problem with a lot of the top-down approach is that yes, maybe the research does back it, that yes, maybe this is effective in 75% of cases, and so that's the approach we're going to go for. However, it doesn't leave a lot of room, because a lot of the top-down approaches are, this is the policy, this is the procedure, you have to follow it. This is how our setting works, this is how you have to do it, you have to follow it. But actually, it doesn't leave a lot of room for the individuals that don't fit into that box, and so it further oppresses them and further leaves them out of getting the support they need, because unfortunately, government don't see it like that. Unfortunately, the managers that actually never come to this setting and never come and work one-to-one with everybody don't see it like that. They just have to look at the majority, and I understand that they're in a different position. but some of the policies and procedures they put in place does not leave enough room for us as practitioners at the bottom to be able to make those adjustments. There's too much structure with it. It needs to be more blended, like you said.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, she was saying something about the managers, and is it, you need to get a suggestion box. That's one way of solving that.
A feedback loop.
Yeah. Then to add to that, what we're saying, let's use the DVSA. Some people are actually driving. If you don't use the top-bottom approach, there will be a problem. So you have areas, you have 30 miles, but you have dual carriageway, you have the motorway. So take, for instance, you take off the cameras and say,
yeah, well, I guess we're getting into a wider debate about authority and power and decision making and all of that. Yeah, which we could debate all day, couldn't we? So what I'm gonna give you an example, okay, of a top-down approach, and see what people's perspectives are. So, back in the, I would say, 80s, possibly 90s. There was a lot of evidence that supported the use of cognitive behavioural therapy. We'll learn about that. Around behaviour, changing behaviour. Okay. The probation service that worked with offenders had a top-down approach to that evidence base. So the probation service, which at the time was mainly social workers. There was a period of time where you had to be a social worker to be a probation officer. That has subsequently changed, but at that time most probation officers were social workers. So social workers working in probation were told, this is a manual, CBT manual, this is what you do. With everybody you work with, this is what you do because we know that works. Okay? What's your response to that?
I do everything in the oven for 20 minutes and then always cooked.
Okay. So it might not be ideal for everyone, but actually if we know it works for most, we're okay with that?
Yeah.
I think we always have to go with majority rules.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think we always have to go with majority rules.
Majority
Same
rules.
with social norms. They're normal, considered social norms, because the majority of people do it. It's always going to be people outside of the box that don't fit in there, but based on evidence, it is what the majority do as in the majority.
Okay.
But you can't ever.
So I mean, you know, that was your argument, was for it, wasn't it? Yeah. So what about people at the back? No wiggle room?
I'm going to be honest with you, I already forgot everything. I got really passionate about it. I was like, yeah.
Well, I mean, so I can share. So Kay, my colleague, was a probation officer, so she experienced this. She hated CBT. It didn't fit with her value base. She could see that for some people it might have worked, but she could see for a lot of people it didn't work. So her counter argument to that would be, why are my skills and abilities and knowledges being devalued by my organisation? Why have I trained for 2-3 years learning all of this stuff to have it reduced to a manual? No wiggle room.
We're not robots, we're humans. My
own experience within the drug and alcohol sector, we went through a period where there was a lot of research around an approach called brief interventions, and this sort of resonates with the point that you were making some time ago, Adam, about so there was this approach that actually a brief intervention of 3 to 6 short contacts, the evidence showed that that was as effective as much longer term work. So you can see how attractive that was to policymakers, to government, to managers. So then it was, that's what you do. For me, I questioned the validity of the evidence base, personally. My perspective was, actually, how representative was the research of the population and of the diversity within the population, and again it undermined sort of my skills, my views, my I guess practice wisdom around what different people's needs were. And I think it was influenced by money and by policymakers wanting to show that they were making a difference, whereas actually what we were seeing on the ground was people would leave the service and they would come back in, they would come back in, they would come back in. So
can we just highlight that you put us in these groups? I actually think that it should be both, so I think there should be an umbrella, but then with wiggle room at person level.
yeah, so the reality is we will be able to see pros and cons, yeah? The important thing is that we have the ability to look critically at, yeah? Which is exactly what you're doing. Yeah? Well done. Oh, a bit of heated debate. Right, so we thought about top down. So next, I want us to think a little bit about the bottom up. So, oh yeah, I don't know why I put this in. It's too much to read. And this is just because it's a passion for me. So I will move on from that. We might come back to it if we have time. So I want us to move on to think about the bottom-up approach. So I talked about that within the presentation, and I presented Gambrill's model for applying evidence-based practice as a practitioner. Okay, so this is this bottom-up approach. So Gambrill talked about with each person that you're working with to formulate a practice question, which has to be quite nuanced. Then search the evidence that's available, appraise the evidence, so weigh it up, critically appraise it. How well does it apply to this particular case that I'm working on? Apply the results that you found, so what you found to be probably the best approach based on the evidence, and then for each individual worker to evaluate that work that they've done. Okay, so this is this bottom-up approach. Okay, so we'll not do a heated debate again, but have some discussions on your tables about the benefits and limitations of this within social work practice. Okay, so this bottom-up approach. So this is saying we're not going to impose from the top. This is what you're going to do. We're going to give you wiggle room, yeah, to do this within your own practice. Yeah? So have a chat about that, and I'll kind of come and have a catch up with people.
What if you're incompetent? Incontinent. Incontinent. Do you know what I mean? You need to have some sort of idea of it.
So I'll play devil's advocate. So I guess part of the requirements for study is to prepare you to be competent at engaging with research evidence and thinking about how that might apply to practice.
Again, that depends on what you're doing.
Okay.
Of what you learn. I'm just thinking, so when I worked in a nursery, it was very much sit down, managers, ones that they might get. Never. We had 0 level 3, so absolutely no one Ofsted was required improvement. You need to have some sort of accountability. Yeah. Some sort of leadership.
Whether they are or not the outcome.
I can't really remember.
So, if we're saying this is the bottom-up approach, okay? So this is saying implementing evidence-based practice from the bottom up, from an individual social work practitioner level, will involve you as a social worker. In fact, this is a model, applying this model to your practice. So I mean, we could use, for example, the case of Jill. Yeah? So if you were working with Jill, you would follow this model to apply. Yes. Oh, yes.
Are you not opening yourself up then to get told off, get fired, get struck off? Because you said, well, actually, I asked a practice question, and I thought, from my knowledge, that was a good idea.
Well, so I guess, so there are some practice settings that will have a top-down approach, which will say, this is the model that we expect you to use, because that's what the evidence shows, or because we just acknowledge it, right? But you also have practices that don't, that allows you guys to use your own professional judgment to determine how you do your case. Yeah? Yeah?
Is that not enough? Yes, I mean, would you not be agree to doing it wrong?
So that's one of the cons that you get.
Yeah. The issue with that will go wrong. It's like a room for error.
Yeah. For people to go, why did you do that?
Even though in the previous place I was working, we were working with young people with addiction, and on our own, we tend to apply different methods depending on the individual. Usually based on what has worked before. Okay, people who behave like this method worked. Getting them to play football or something worked for them, and then you follow with that. So
you then if you think, oh, it's not working, you then adapt it to something else?
Yeah, you end up doing trial and error. Try this, even well, you come back, okay, let's try something else. But at the end of the day, okay, why didn't that one work? Therefore, we have come up with a third model, different from the one we tried initially. When some other person comes, try this, try it. Sometimes it could be more resource consuming, time consuming, because you're trying different models. But in issues, social work kind of issue, it looks like the most appropriate thing to do, because there are no one-size-fits-all for humans. There are no rules at work.
Because of that, there not being one size fits all, everyone's different. So how you would approach somebody is very different potentially to how I would do it. But then actually the service that brings someone usually will require the same service or deserve to have access to. You will evaluate. They can be received very, very different
services, resulting to different outcomes.
Subsequently,
which is only it's hard, isn't it?
It's a disadvantage.
Because if I went there and I was there for 6 months, but she was sorted in a month, I would be a bit like, what do you say? Oh, what she has?
Group supervision.
You can actually be most competent only when I was up there.
What can you help with job satisfaction?
Yeah. And it requires you to research more. Yes. Well, then we're going to get paid. It requires you to know everything. You're going to get paid more because I don't want to, think of my own initiative all the time for the same money as someone else. Is that where the money is? You desire financial income. I want to be in the private. I want to be in the private hospital sector.
Well, I like to experience with NHS
I don't have a plan yet.
I had a 5-year plan. I just want to coach this.
Yeah, that's it.
From the first day here, here 3 years ago, they were all like, what are you doing? She had this, and then I took her contribution that was top down, 4 years in.
But here, try to
She was working now, yeah, right now.
Yeah, you can work for the hospital,
Yeah, but you probably use the hospital discharge team. That's
yeah.
So there's not a lot of jobs there.
She's only here because I said to her last night. I don't know what do you have any?
That's where more of the
I want to work for a private sector in the register.
you have someone that's
Top down, yeah, I'm at the top, you do it. I've got the question.
oh my days.
She's going to be great.
You should take up another career as a comedian. You can't be wrong.
I've got nothing else to do.
And then you find
That'll be all for today.
Well, this means stuff for the fight, isn't it?
It says on mine.
Yeah, that says one more.
One more.
It's on Thursday that it's been cancelled.
Thursday.
But according to my calendar, we have 1:15 to 4:15. That's EGA 1009.
Let me see if you're.
Elizabeth Garden Addison.
I was told yesterday, no, it's just
No, I don't want to.
There for 1 hour after you.
No, go your calendar itself.
No, that thing is should be for 7. I don't think. Is it the EGA one?
Yeah, the EGA is today. EGA 1009. Yeah.
Let me look at the time. Look at the first time.
No, she'll tell us anyways. If she's just a last time.
I think the online one is on the calendar.
You stay in the school still.
We're in next week. And then on the 17th, I believe, we're on Thursday.
Gives you food.
Yeah, it's really sporadic. Yeah, I've got to keep on top of it, and I'm trying to organise things around.
Wi-Fi is free. Connect with Telecom.
standard managers.
And then
That way, not lost in the
you know you have to say it. Should we just go? Michael.
Yeah.
I want to just
Slow down, love.
6 years ago. Then you didn't see that.
What do you want to do?
right, okay.
Yeah.
I think
I enjoyed the different communities.
Yeah.
So I could never.
in reality,
Yeah.
probably does not.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I feel like it leads to like a lot of gaps in like the social
I mean,
media.
yeah. That's what I thought. And I thought, you often so much more opportunities than just the behaviour. And if I left education, oh no.
Okay.
Oh, do you?
What do you
If you don't pass that,
And the argument would be around some form of bottom-up.
not that good.
No.
You see, that's why I like to do the GRE. Everything is actually got the GRE. You where you things off there. So there's one of the best friends all on my office stuff. So you've got and you do your own best, you get rid of it.
So we did it. It was a full-time study.
Yeah.
You want and not
Right.
and then every exam was
No, no.
Yeah.
and then you work through it in days. Yeah. You're researching what you want to research.
Well, that's something that
Yeah.
I did it for 8 years and then it part time.
Full time with 3 my best friend today. Pick up
Registered with the EBP.
Yeah.
Let us say when they listen.
Well, kids I had a graduate degree
Oh, I know. I was up like 2 a.m. Like, I got an 8.
However,
that's you don't look at without
I think it's, I don't know, he just it's not so much that you research, but there's how research. But I did like research on my own stuff. Yeah. Okay, so if we could just draw those discussions to a close and just do a little bit of feedback from some of your discussions about that. So this being the approach, and as Angela said, like it feels like a dissertation, which, you know, I guess we can do it to varying degrees, but to do it really, really well, it's quite a big piece of work, I guess, particularly if you're doing that on a case-by-case basis. So what were some of your discussions about this bottom-up approach to this thing that you as a social worker, you need to embed evidence-based practice on a day-to-day basis? What were some of your discussions? I know there were some good discussions, so I'm going to wait for some more.
So,
Oh, yeah.
developing practice wisdom using this model for social workers can result in individuals getting different individuals who came, service users who had come for same reasons, getting different approaches and most likely different outcomes, which could be problematic because every social worker, based on their own experience or practice wisdom, carry out from the results of or outcome of their own evidence-based on their practices. So,
and I think that was one of your discussions at the back as well, wasn't it? That actually, if each member of a team, say, is following this approach, they may find different evidence, they may interpret that evidence differently or apply it differently, and therefore you might get two people coming in who get different service, different approach. Yeah. Anyone want to counter that? Let's start a debate again. But I don't know, does anyone, what are people's views about that?
I agree.
You agree? I'll play devil's advocate then, yeah? So I would say there are never two people who access a service that are the same or that would get the same outcome even if you did implement the same thing. I would also say, and this is open to debate, this is my perspective, yeah? I would also say that even if you have a top-down approach, a manual, here's your CBT, I would deliver it slightly differently to how Sarah would deliver it, to how Samuel would deliver it. Because we're all unique human beings and we will all use ourselves slightly differently. Yeah? So, there's validity, there's also a counter-argument. Yeah.
It's all right if you're good at your job, I guess.
Yeah. And what do we hear about social workers?
We're not good at our job.
Is that a lot of people are not happy with their experience of social workers. What else? What else are people's views and perspectives about this as an approach? So it might lead to this kind of, you might have a team adopting multiple different approaches, yeah. Sorry, Lizzie.
I don't know how this fits in exactly, but I do know a few teachers who, I know one particular teacher in fact, she says how much she gets so much work put on her because her colleague potentially isn't as effective as she is, so they go to her to get her to do more work, and she's like, I don't like this sort of doesn't fit well with me, because I'm a better practitioner than this person here, then if that fits in with more workloads, because they're working from the same sort of hymn sheet, but it's not working for everybody because they're just not as good. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's life.
Yeah. She's quite vocal about it.
Yeah, and that will happen. Again, we're all different. We all, all of that. There is a key point there about the time that this would take to do and to do in a meaningful way. That actually what social workers often say is they don't have time to do their CPD, to keep up to date, to find the evidence. So that would be an argument, wouldn't it? That actually to do this and to do it well, which would promote an argument for a top-down approach. Just tell us what we have to do, because actually with the pressures in the system, that's the best way to do it.
Sort of general consensus was that if a social worker was following this, they'd probably have the best personal development and continual growth as a woman and as a social worker.
Yeah, and it is a requirement of the regulator that you have to evidence it. So Social Work England, if you register, you have to provide evidence of your CPD. So if you did this, I've kind of done a bit of research. So what I do, about teaching. So when I go on that's all evidence. That's marvellous, like an evidence for CPD. So yeah, but it means that you're keeping up to date. You're not stagnating, doesn't it? If you have the opportunity to do this, yeah. Sorry, Lucy, were you?
Yeah, kind of. But so obviously, when you continue professional development, you keep going through and research for that. But if you, for example, had a case and you're like, oh, Henny, this specific approach might work for them, but I don't have enough knowledge on it, so I'm going to go and further research what other options there are, how it works, whether it would be, and you get all this evidence that's the newest research and all of that, and you go, brilliant. And then 2-3 years later, you have someone who similarly think, this approach might work, I've gathered quite a bit of knowledge on it, so I'm going to use that. But you have to keep checking up on the research, because it might be that a new piece of research came out and completely disproved that any of the previous knowledge that you gathered, you don't realise that you haven't kept up with it. So if you are going to use the bottom-up approach, you have to take on board the responsibility of staying up to date with that research, even if you think you're confident in it. Check that that's still actually an effective approach, or is someone taking that approach and developed it a little bit more to make it even more effective, things like that, which is time consuming. And also it's difficult if you don't know where to even start looking for some of that evidence, and there's no guidance on that. If you're going to bottom up approach, you've got to do it yourself.
So it does require time, and it does require certain skills around, you know, finding the evidence base, appraising it. Those are quite, we talked about that, it feels like a lot of responsibility, you know, to do that. But in some respects, that's why you have to go through either a degree or a postgraduate programme to become a social worker. It's saying, well, you know, so my colleague felt totally de-skilled, because it's like, I could do that and I want to do that as a social worker. I want to have that discretion to be able to do that, and that's been taken away from me. So any other discussions about the benefits and limitations of...
Limitations, somebody on the table discussed it, was that if you, I think it was you actually, that said that if you're the person that's trying to implement the change, then, you know, is the new person that's chomping at the bit still, the person that's still being passionate, and you're surrounded by a bunch of burnout people that have had enough, that want to follow a top down, and you're making them look bad.
Yeah, it can create some conflict. And I shared an experience with this group that I didn't share with others. So one of our previous students went on placement to a drug service where this model of brief intervention was imposed. And she had somebody with a very complex history of trauma and all sorts of stuff, and she was really cross that she wasn't comfortable that 6 sessions of this brief intervention model was going to suffice. So she took it upon herself to follow this kind of evidence-based practice framework and formulate a practice question that picked up the nuances in that case that were different to the general population, found the evidence base, appraised it, and applied the results, and argued to management that actually in this case I can justify that this person needs more intervention based on this evidence, and she got approval to do that. So there's also something about this process can empower you as a social work practitioner to be able to argue against things that you feel are unjust or unfair or whatever. You know, but it takes a certain skill set to do. Sorry, Jim.
I think it's not a one size. It should not be a one size fits all. There should be a possibility of going through this for every individual.
Yes.
Just so we can appraise each and every individual.
Yeah.
On their merits and demerits, and
yes.
then implement the care as it's supposed to be.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, but that, in terms of people's capacity to do this on a case-by-case basis with the nuances within their caseload is a challenge, you know? But
yeah, it would be a challenge, but it would be like not taking somewhere's, for instance, care plan, and implementing on James, for instance.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So this comes from the Plath book on the reading list. So so these are the assumptions that underpin this idea of evidence-based practice from the bottom up. That actually, firstly, the evidence can be found. So we come back to that messy question at the beginning about whether, you know, actually there are big studies that will answer all of these practice questions that we have or not. And certainly there are some areas of practice where it's particularly difficult to establish an evidence base. My own practice background, substance use, very difficult because it's illegal. There's all sorts of social stigma attached to it. There's all sorts of variables that impact on someone's development of a drug problem and recovery. So very, very difficult to establish a good evidence base. It's also, if you're a busy practitioner, having the right access. Like obviously you're students at the moment, so you have access to the university's systems, library services, journals, yeah? You have that via our library service. As practitioners, you will have varying levels of access to resources and research. We all have Google, but actually if you're looking at really good quality peer-reviewed research, it will be variable, and you may struggle with time to access it. Yeah. The assumption that certain evidence is stronger and better than other evidence. So that's back to this idea of positivism and interpretivism. Are we looking for, it has to be a randomised controlled trial or a systematic review, or actually how valid is the small-scale study about a community in Herefordshire, for example, is that valid, when I'm appraising that, is that valid to this population? Or what's the chances of that bit of research being done in Hereford? Probably not. The effectiveness of interventions can be established. So this assumption that actually we can establish that an intervention is effective. On what basis are we measuring effectiveness? Which I think brings us back to something that Adam was saying earlier about the influence of things like cost. Yeah? So if I look at, again, my own practice background in terms of substance use, if you read some of the evidence from kind of public health, some of the evidence of effectiveness is things like reduction of drug-related harm. That's a positive outcome for a lot of research is retaining somebody in treatment. So the things that they'll say are evidence-based approaches aren't necessarily having the outcomes that necessarily you want and you're aiming for in your particular casework. Maybe you want someone to recover from their drug or alcohol problem, to move forward and all of that. Yeah? But the evidence base that's saying this is the approach might be based on actually this has kept people in treatment for a period of time. Yeah. And that interventions can be replicated. So that, you look at a piece of research and go, okay, CBT has been shown to be effective, for example, in this population. Will I deliver it in the same way as it was delivered in the research project, and therefore have the opportunity to secure the same outcomes? Again, that can be variable. So it's a challenging, if we're looking at pure evidence-based practice, it's a challenging thing to implement. Right, how are we doing? Right, I think I might have a video. Will it play? So now I just want to move on to think about this idea of evidence-informed practice. So I'm going to play this. Not working. Can't hear it. Oh, there we are.
The gang is coming for dinner, and you are the designated chef. This particular gang is multi-generational, and tastes and preferences are, of course, all over the map. Vegans, vegetarians, carnivores, omnivores, gourmands, and gourmets. You pull out a favorite cookbook or two. You've customized your recipes to really fit the palates of the individual guests. You've remembered who's allergic to what. You've chopped and mixed and sautéed and grilled and sauced, organizing the cooking process so that everything will be ready, piping hot, at the table, on time. Of course, it's a hit. What does this little story have to do with evidence-informed practice? Plenty. Your ability to design and create a meal that is an out-of-the-park home run depends on your ability to synthesize evidence, harness your own practitioner wisdom and experience, and build the needs and preferences of your guests into an evidence-informed culinary delight. At its simplest, evidence-informed practice is a service approach that's based on these things. Research evidence, the stuff you find in journals, textbooks, and all the halls of academia, derived from sound scientific methodology, evidence that is valid and tested and can be used in the real world of your practice. Practitioner wisdom and experience, drawing upon your clinical excellence as you determine the best approach in a given situation. And the needs and preferences of clients, based on documented feedback from children, youth, and families that are fully engaged in the treatment process. This isn't about only doing things one way. It's about having a toolbox of approaches, all of which are tested and true, and using your skills and experiences to know which one or ones to choose in a given situation. Evidence-informed practice isn't limited to manuals, rigid process, and off-the-shelf solutions, though there's a place for them too. It's about ensuring that services, systemic planning to individual cases, are built on a solid foundation of evidence in all its forms. Harnessing the power of research evidence and integrating it into effective evidence-informed practice requires a few things. A commitment from the organization's leadership to the value of evidence, along with a culture of professional development. Training and ongoing coaching, and your personal readiness and willingness to acquire new skills and to modify your practice. Here are three things you can do to move your practice toward a stronger EIP model. Gather evidence that is relevant to what you're doing, and ask yourself why and how you should use it. Reflect. Begin the process of synthesis by bringing evidence together with what you know, what you live in your day-to-day practice. Reach out. Draw upon information and opinions from colleagues and, of course, from children, youth, and families. At the end of the day, using evidence in a systematic way will strengthen your practice, without having to deconstruct and reconstruct the way you think and work. It's about embracing clinical wisdom and client voice within a structure that brings it all together. It's about committing to learning and keeping your mind open to the fact that those tools in that toolbox will change or be updated from time to time, making them and you stronger and more relevant. And perhaps most importantly, living in evidence-informed practice is all about enhancing your ability to help children, youth, and families. The center can help you tap into the evidence, no matter where it's found. For information, resources, tools, and support, get in touch with us at the Ontario Centre of Excellence for Child and Youth Mental Health.
So, this idea of evidence-informed just moves us in a slightly more, I'm thinking the wiggle room thing, that kind of direction where actually we're not following evidence in a very rigid way. So how does, what's your takeaway from that in terms of implementing evidence-informed practice in social work? Sorry? You're feeling hungry now? Does that feel doable? So, I guess the key bit that comes out of that we didn't really pick up on, I think we did have that conversation on your table, is this idea of the choices of the people that we work with. That's a key component of this evidence-informed practice that isn't really present within the evidence-based practice argument. So if we follow a purist evidence-based practice model, that places the power very much in our hands as social work practitioners, either dictated by policymakers, managers, or from our own research. So how can we use evidence-informed practice with the people that we work with, do you think? So to include their perspectives, like any ideas about how you could make that happen?
Like experts by experience.
Yeah, yeah. In what way? Like, so if you're in practice, how could you use those perspectives to develop evidence-informed practice, do you think? Sorry, I'm not looking at you, I'm not looking at you. Any ideas?
Do you mean doing assessments? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like working together and asking it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Because that seems too simple. Yeah, well, I think we're all sat there looking at you like, what does she want from this answer?
Well, there's different ways that you can do that, isn't there? There's different ways you can operationalise that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Meetings.
So it might be, for example, if a policy or managers are looking to implement a top-down approach, that they have consultation and feedback from people with lived experience as well in their consideration of that evidence. It may also be as an individual practitioner, like let's say, right, you follow that model that we had before, bottom-up approach, yeah, you do that, you've got a particular person with particular needs or issues, you've got away, you've had a look at the evidence base. How would it be to share that with the person that you're working with? To say, like, I've had a look, how would that feel? I don't know, Lucy.
I think it would be empowering for them as well to say, look, this is what I found, this is how the approach works, this is what I'll be contributing, this is what you'll need to contribute. Do you think that's going to be effective for you? Do you think that's something that you're going to find engaging? If not, let's discuss which areas don't work for you, and then I can go and do a bit more research into, okay, how can I adapt that more to meet your needs? And it means that you know that what you're providing is actually going to be effective, and they're going to engage in that because you also need them to want to join in on it. Otherwise, you know, you can take a horse to water. Is that the same?
Yes, it is the same.
Or I made that
it is the same. Yeah.
But,
so that feels kind of okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not work with everyone. Sorry, Adam.
So just a question. The cases you handle, you handle one case at a time, or you can have multiple cases?
You will have multiple cases.
Because the assumption here is as though you have all the time in the world and
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah.
How do I speak to someone, tell them I'll go and do a research for one person and I'm handling 5 other people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this will be the challenge that you will have when you get in practice.
Minimum of five cases per week. Minimum.
Yeah.
1 per day. Minimum.
Yeah.
Except you have a car, you have to justify why you have a car, but minimum of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will vary depending what team, what practice setting you're in. Which is why implementing that bottom-up approach is really, really challenging without organisational support and access. Those might be really key things when you're applying for jobs. And, you know, we've got students who've got multiple offers. Ask those questions about caseload, protected time while you're a newly qualified social worker, access to research and practice that can support you to continue to develop. Those sorts of things. If you want to be the best practitioner you can be, they might be really important considerations.
So just a general question. You said some student got offers of job.
Yeah.
Offers.
Yeah.
What about the ASYE, the 1 year you do before? Because I believe most organizations require you to do ASYE.
Local authorities, certainly.
Yeah. But how come they got a job without doing the ASYE if they're just graduating?
Because you get a newly qualified job usually, so you'll get a job that supports you through your ASYE.
Oh, I see, that kind of job. Oh, I thought it was like...
Yeah. And part of the requirement for local authorities in terms of the ASYE is that you have a slightly reduced workload that recognises that actually you're learning and you need to develop your evidence base, your practice wisdom, you know, because actually this is a toolbox that you'll build over time. Once you're a bit more experienced, you've got loads more stuff to draw on. But actually consulting with the people that you work with doesn't always take a lot of time. That conversation that you described doesn't take a long time, but can make quite a significant difference to the person receiving it. Or at least finding out what, you know, you might have, if you've you know, you're thinking, oh, CBT is going to work in this situation. If that person has had CBT and hated it or didn't get anything out of it, you're on a hiding to nothing. So even having that conversation about, you know, have you tried anything before? What was your experience of that? That's taking the perspectives of people with lived experience into account as well, isn't it? So that idea of evidence-informed practice is thinking about empirical evidence and research, your own clinical wisdom that you will build over time, and sharing that with other members of your team, your supervisor, but also sharing the perspectives of people with lived experience as well. It's been a heavy day today, hasn't it? Yeah, I think that's us. Yeah, references are there. If the slide wants to move on, it doesn't. There we are. Slides are there. Thank you for that.
So where's all this? Is this on the... I can't find it.
The slides for the sessions, if there are slides, will be on Blackboard.
Yeah.
All the presentations that I want you to do in advance are on Pebble Pad. So all the homeworky stuff is on Pebble Pad. Yeah. Oh, you got that on Thursday, haven't you? Yeah. Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks for... It's my laptop. Nobody saw that. It's a work laptop.
I just hope.
Oh, so everything. So sorry, Jenny. So that because Nanjimo would do USB.
They're very robust.
So the two classes we've done today, they are not on Blackboard yet. They are not on Blackboard yet. We can only see the digital one from yesterday.
Oh, on Blackboard as in the recording?
No, the actual slides. The slides.
Well, that's news to me. I thought they were.